Hello, my name is Lisa Kinlan, and I am here to share my abortion story. I was very young and very promiscuous in my teenage years. And of course, since I was promiscuous, I got pregnant, which is no surprise. And at that time of my life, I didn't feel that I had a secure relationship with those closest to me, that I could go to them for help. And so, what the first thing that came to my mind, because I was in panic, was to get an abortion. Planned Parenthood had done their job at advertising because I didn't even have to think about it. That was the first thing that came to my head. I went, and I find it interesting now that when I was going to go, I didn't ask a best friend or the guy to take me. I asked some random person that I didn't know very well. And I see now, looking back, that the shame was already setting in, that I didn't even want to tell a close friend. I wanted someone to take me that barely knew me. I went to the abortion clinic, and it was very cold and dark, nothing like your average doctor's appointment. There was no counseling done. I just signed in, and they took me back, kind of assembly line, kind of. They didn't want you showing any emotion. They would just tell you to be quiet. And they didn't say this, but they gave me the impression that, you chose this, so just buck up and deal with it. It was painful, but afterwards they took me to what I remember being a very dingy recovery room and gave me a stale cookie and a cup of juice, and 30 minutes later they escorted me out the door. At that time in my life, because I didn't even recognize what was happening, I didn't recognize that it was a life. I just pretty much adopted the idea that, this is my lot in life. I'm going to be a tramp, not worthy of anything, just trashy. And so at that point, I just went on a downward spiral of destruction: drugs, alcohol abuse, and still continued promiscuity. And then several years later, when I was 22, I got pregnant again out of wedlock. And I was considering again to do abortion. But that's when the Lord got a hold of me, and through my sweet sister, who reached out boldly and said, "This is not what the Lord wants for your life. He has a better plan for your life." And somehow her saying that just struck a chord with me. And being the person that I was, and that everyone around me knew that I had been up to that point, I had never given them any persuasion to think that I could even handle raising a child on my own. So when I actually decided to have the child, there was a lot of people in my life that were doubting that I would be able to handle it. But God, He knew that He was going to be with me, and that He was going to provide everything that I needed. And He did. He provided me with a home. I mean, who knew that a 23-year-old girl could buy a duplex and live in one side and rent out the other side, and that would pay her mortgage for 12 years? That's just one of the many miracle stories that He did. He provided me a wonderful, godly husband that loves me unconditionally, that before I married knew my story, and he had to know my story, because I wanted to go in eyes wide open. And not only did he love me unconditionally, but he also adopted my son. It was many years later. I didn't get abortion healing right away, but many years later, I was at a point in my life where I wanted all that God had for me. And I prayed that very bold but scary prayer that I will do anything you want me to do, Lord. And he answered, and he said, okay, I want you to go to a Bible study for abortion healing. And my response was, anything but that. And I fought him on that for a couple of years, but he was persistent, so lovingly patient and persistent. And I then went to the Surrendering the Secret study. The first time I took it, I had a friend that also had abortion in her past, and she came with me, and I felt like the first time I took it, I went to be a supportive friend, and at the end of that study, it helped her greatly, but at the end of that study, I checked that box and said, okay, Lord, I've done what you've asked me to do. What's next? And his response was, no, you haven't. You need to do it for you. So I had to take it a second time, and then that is when the healing began. After my second time through the study, I started helping my dear friend Tricia Heflin and co-leading. And even at that point, I was still, just helping her. I wasn't really co-leading or anything like that. But I did that for about 3 years, and then it came time for her to move to another city. And that's when the Lord asked me, all right, Lisa, it's time for you to step up. And are you really going to allow this ministry to go to the wayside because you're scared? And it was that turning point that even though I was still very, very scared, that I couldn't. I knew there were so many women out there that needed this study. Not that I'm this heroic, wonderful person, but that I needed to keep the study going so God could do transformation in other women's lives. And I knew at that point, I didn't know what he was calling me into, but I knew that he was going to use my abortion story to help other women. And I'm so thankful that he took me on the journey that he did. And to get me where I am today, that I am willing. And that's all he's asking me to do, is be willing. To open my home and be willing and to love on women. And he is the one that does the transformation. And he has continued to grow this ministry and asked me to be a part of it. And I'm so thankful he's patient with me, because I still get scared sometimes. But I know through his word that he has asked me to be a part of this. And so I encourage all of the women out there today that if you're scared and you don't want to you don't want to go through a study like that, you don't want to come to a study like that, I promise you, you will not regret it. Because what you thought was impossible is totally possible. That you can walk in freedom, that you no longer have to hide in shame, that you can be confident in who you are and no longer be insecure. I was so insecure for so many years, and my insecurity kept me from all the wonderful things that God has for me. And now I'm finally embracing it. And I encourage you to do the same. Don't let Satan keep you captive. Choose life. And honor your child. This is one of the ways I get to honor my unborn child, is by doing this ministry and helping others. God has given me a way to do that, to honor him first, but also to honor my unborn child. And I am so thankful. Thank you for listening.